Welcome to the School of Batman, a podcast where we ask academics to help Batman fight crime using their research. I'm your host, Chris George, amateur scientist and professional Batman enthusiast. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the Watchtower of the Justice League. We're pleased to be joined by Alberto Marocchino.
Hi, hello.
Who has a PhD in plasma physics from Imperial College London and is currently a researcher at the National Institute of Physics in Italy. So Alberto, welcome to the podcast and thanks for joining us. We normally start with a bit of background on yourself and how you got to where you are today, what you're interested in, but in today's one I think I want to actually try and start by unpacking even what it is you do. The term plasma physics is a new term to me. I know both words kind of independent of each other, but I don't know what they mean combined together. So what's plasma physics?
Sure, that's very interesting to explain. As you said, the two words mean something different by themselves, but it's very interesting when you try to combine them together. And if you think it's something very simple that everyone has maybe sort of experience. Well, I guess everyone learned that if you take a piece of ice and you warm it up, you will convert it to a liquid phase, so you get some water. And you can keep on warming it up and you will transform it from water to steam. And most of the people ends up with this sort of experience. But you can do something extra. You can keep on warming it up, so heating the system up to crazy temperature, so let's say the temperature of the sun, to give a figure of merit, just an idea. And what happens is that you give so much energy to the atoms, to the system, that the electrons cannot stay trapped together to the atoms anymore. So the electron will be stripped from the atom that now will become ions, and the electrons will move somehow and the ions will move on the other direction. Now what happens is that both ions and electrons will carry a charge. So that means that there's an invisible web that all connect these particles, and this invisible web is the magnetic field. So this charged particle moving with this invisible web, interconnecting all of them, is called plasma. And the surrounding stars are, for example, just made of plasma.
Okay, so this is another state of matter akin to kind of water, solid, gas.
This is a very classical definition, and it is defined as the fourth state of matter, indeed.
So that seems like a very basic kind of building block of science, but that's not even a terminology I've ever come across before. Is it because that's a new discovery, or is it because the conditions that you need to put matter under that state to get to that high level of energy are so difficult to achieve, it's not worth kind of talking to in that sphere of the three states of matter that are more familiar to us here on Earth?
I think that when you learn physics as an undergrad, probably, or high school, for example, you rely on something that you have direct experience with. So something you can also probably run some simple experiment in a lab. It is not really easy to produce plasma on Earth. To achieve these extreme high temperatures, you need new technologies, like for example you need super powerful lasers.
Is that the real term, super powerful lasers?
It is unfortunately not the technical term. You call like for example megajoule laser or kilojoule laser or short pulse lasers, for example.
That's a shame, because I know there's terms like supermassive black hole and things like that. I was hoping it might be another technical term along those lines. But so when was this state of matter kind of discovered? I imagine this is something which obviously came after the first three states. Is that an accurate guess?
It is. I think well, I cannot really trace it back the name. I've never actually went into the story of the name. It was originally called ionized gases, and then it was renamed with the name plasma. The name plasma derived from medicine, actually, because the plasma in blood has exactly the same effect or procedure that the magnetic field has on plasma. So they actually play the same role in two very different contexts. So it was renamed as plasma physics. So I think if you wanted to trace it back, it probably goes back of 200 years or more, when people were actually trying to understand the different phases, and they suddenly realizes that the state of matter in stars cannot be neither solid, liquid or vapor, but it has to be slightly different because of the very high temperatures and pressure you can achieve.
And so, as you say, it's something that's very difficult to achieve on Earth. So how does one go about studying these ideas?
I think there's different application to plasma physics. There are some industrial one, but I think they are, for me, less challenging than others. So there's very interesting application. For example, the name of fusion. So you want to achieve thermonuclear fusion. That means producing clean energy in a very neat and efficient way. Or you can study new particle accelerator physics, or you can study, for example, how to recreate small stars in a laboratory. So these are motivation that brings the scientists together to develop the scientific background, but also the technology to achieve this sort of results. And most of these achievement goes under the fact that you need to have state-of-the-art technology, as I was saying, as laser or superconducting magnets or super powerful computer to control the physics underneath the process. Because we have to remember that most of this process occurs very quickly at a nanoseconds or femtosecond timescale, so millions of a second, so it's extremely quick. So you need super powerful computer to control the physics, and at the same time you need computer to try to understand via numerical simulation what's going on in the real world.
You're working at the National Institute of Physics at the moment. How did you get to something that sounds like quite an esteemed place to work and studying such a very specific area of physics? What was your journey like to get there?
My journey is actually a very long journey, in the sense that as an undergrad, I got really interested in something that was very challenging in physics, and I got interested in inertial confinement fusion, so production of, let's say, clean energy in a controlled way. And I was also interested in a field of physics where mathematics could play a key role, because as a mathematics enthusiast, I also wanted to have not only a physical experience of what was going on, but also a mathematical understanding of the process. And I had some little experience in the United States, and I discovered that plasma physics could actually be the right place where you can mix new challenging experiments with an understanding of what is going on by the use of supercomputers that were actually bringing mathematics to a new level. So a great place where you can actually study physics and plasma physics, I would probably say one of the best department in the world for this sort of topic, is in London at his Imperial College. So I spent 3 years for my PhD at Imperial College, in which I can focus on plasma physics in different aspects, and I actually got into the topic, I would say, 100%. After that, since I'm Italian, I probably thought that I couldn't live without my food and my sunshine, so I had to leave London, unfortunately, and I reached Italy and the National Institute of Physics, where we are actually developing experiments and numerical simulation at the same time. So there's quite a big group working all together and trying to mix a different aspect of plasma physics in order to give a general overview of specific problems in this field.
So we ask our guests which Batman actor they would like to represent their Batman in their story. And do you have one?
Yes, of course. Indeed I have. As a Batman fanatic, I really like Christian Bale in Batman Begins. And I'd like to stress out why I like it in this specific occasion, because I think it has some connection with science. It might sound weird, but it is like this. Think about Batman Begins and the role of Alfred, the butler. He is a mentor. He is an external and wise point of view of what is he doing. Sometimes the superhero, Batman, is getting lost or he is losing his energy toward fighting crime. So he needs someone that pointing him to the right direction. This is exactly what a scientific mentor is, and this is why it is important for science to be open, to share information, to have an external point of view, not only to convey the right idea, but also to put things together and to have an external point of view with a very wise person. And the other important thing is when they want to build the first Batman suit. If you remember in the movie, they try to do it in different ways, to buy different materials from different producers, and sometimes the material is too soft, sometimes it's too stiff. It takes Alfred and Batman sometimes to figure out what's the perfect material and what's the right Batman suit, the right gear. And this is how science works actually. It never happens the first time, or this is very rare. You have to go through a lot of procedures and a lot of errors. It is exactly the same in science. You need to be consistent in what you do, and you don't need to give up. You need to keep your goal very fixed in mind, and you need to figure out all the failures, so counting the odds to get to the right place. And I think it is very important, the sentence that Alfred says to Batman all of the time in the movie, "Why do we fall, sir?" So that we can learn to pick ourselves up. That in science means don't give up when things don't work, understand where and when you have been wrong, fix it and move on.
Wonderful, thank you. That was actually quite heartfelt. I enjoyed that. Things are getting hot on Earth politically, and the newly formed Justice League needs a base of operations outside of the domain of countries and governments. By pooling together their technologies from the various peoples, they decide to create the Watchtower in a crater on the moon. Bruce has been tasked with providing the power core for this facility, and unlike Superman, he's also going to need a mode of transport to get him there and back. What can the team from Wayne Tech do to help? Okay, so we've got this effectively a moon base being set up here by the Justice League, and everyone's bringing their technologies from their various kind of alien races, and Bruce has to make a power core. So traditional things of generating power are probably not going to work very well on the moon. There's not a lot of resources there, so he's going to need something sustainable, I guess. How can your research help here, and how can your team help?
So I think we all are aware that oil at some point will run out. So we are developing different strategies to get clean energy out from it. And one, for example, is given by the power of the sun. But can we actually get something a little bit deeper than that? So just not taking the outcome, so the solar radiation to power ourselves, but trying to reproduce actually the star, so the sun on Earth. And actually we can do that. This goes under the name of controlled thermonuclear fusion. Now there's a slightly difference between what the sun does and what we can do, but actually the interesting and super cool part is that if you use such a technique called inertial confinement fusion, that is a specific approach to thermonuclear fusion, what you can actually do, you can achieve tens of millions of degrees and many billion times, the pressure actually can be many billion times greater than the atmospheric one. And what you can do, you can recreate a small star on Earth and you can get energy out from it. The process actually is fairly simple if you want to convey to a normal speaker. If you take, for example, two hydrogen atoms that are very common on the Earth, but also in the space, hydrogen is the most common element ever, and you can actually apply such a, super force, superhero force, to combine them together, you will get helium, so another natural element. The point is, if you weigh the two hydrogen atoms, they will have some weight, and this weight is more than the weight of the helium. So some energy or some mass actually has been lost, and this lost mass has become energy. Now, if you can control this process and you can control it very well on Earth, for example, with a super powerful laser. What you can actually do, you can achieve a small star on Earth or on the crater of the moon for Batman, and you can produce crazy energy in a super controlled way, and especially in a very natural way.
Okay, there's a lot of ideas to unpack there, so I think I'm going to go right back to the beginning. We talked about the concept of clean energy. So starting with that, what does clean energy actually mean?
Clean energy means that you're not producing pollution by any means. So that means that you're not producing, for example, CO2 on one side, but also you're not producing, for example, radioactive pollution. That is, for example, classical for nuclear power plant. So nuclear power plant does not produce CO2, but for example has some nuclear waste. With clean energy, you want to produce something that has no impact on the environment.
Okay, so that would be things like wind, hydrothermal, solar. Those are all things would be clean energies, is that correct?
That's all clean energy, of course.
Okay, so we're talking about the idea of all of these things. They either require some kind of activity going on, so with like tidal, hydrothermal, those kind of things are not really going to work on the moon. They're setting up this Justice League base, so they need a small kind of contained energy source, which is going to not really require any outside things in the sense of trees or whatever, or rely on sunshine. So you said hydrogen is the most common element in the universe, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you're on the moon, I know there's not really kind of an atmosphere, but you would have an abundant kind of availability of hydrogen just by... How would you extract hydrogen from around you? What would you do?
Well, if I'm thinking to have like a spaceship, for example, just traveling through the space, it will be surrounded by very little amount of gas. And in this gas that is extremely rare, but I can actually find some hydrogen around it. So I can just capture it and I can use it, for example, to give energy to my system.
Yeah, because that's another thing Batman's going to need. He's going to need a mode of transport to get to the moon and back, but we'll come to that in a little while. So they've got this moon base, the Watchtower, and they have some kind of extraction method to pull hydrogen in from around the base. And that hydrogen is just readily available. It's the most abundant kind of element knocking around, and you'll be able to get that when you're on the moon. So then you said you force hydrogen atoms together, and then you said by forcing them together that creates helium. And then there was some lost mass, and that mass was the energy which is then used as the power core. So as a way of just trying to understand that a little bit better, would that be the same as like taking a log and burning a log, and then the log is not going to be as heavy as like what it was before you started because you've burnt some of that off as fire? Is that the same idea?
Yeah, that's actually the same idea.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because it's going to reduce in size because things are going to come off as ash and some fire is going to come off. Okay, I think I get that a little bit more now. That was a pretty difficult concept to understand. Okay, so you're smashing these readily available hydrogen atoms together, and that's going to create helium. So what do you do with the helium created? Is that like a secondary output? Like is that a goal of the process, or is that just something that has to happen to get this energy that's released from that creation?
No, it's just something that happens, is the output. So actually you can keep on, fuse together or put together atoms in order to get energy out from it. If you do some calculation, you discover that you can combine, for example, helium atoms, and you will get again energy out from it. But the process becomes more and more difficult the more the atoms are bigger. So you want to do this process with the lowest mass available, and the lighter material you have is actually a hydrogen. There's no lighter material that you can actually use. So hydrogen is the smallest, the simpler, material atoms or material you can have. So you want to rely on hydrogen. And so helium is just the output of your process, and so you can just release it with no problem once you're done. So it's just a plain result.
Okay, so the helium atom is more complicated than the hydrogen atom, right?
It is more complicated. It is double the mass.
Is there any reason in principle, given the technology, increasing in the future, that then couldn't be a second phase machine where you could combine helium atoms and lose some mass and have that converted to energy and use that as a secondary fuel? Is it purely a technological complication, or is there something theoretical that would block that?
No, that's just purely, I would say, technological. So we haven't achieved so far fusion, so it's very difficult to envision the possibility to fuse together heavier atoms. But once we get the technology, there's no process that prevents us to probably fuse together heavier atoms. You can actually do that. You can envision in a probably faraway future that could be done with no problem.
From a theoretical standpoint, would heavier atoms give off more energy?
No, that's actually the contrary. So there's a limit, and the breaking limit is the iron element. So you can fuse atoms together up to iron. Once you reach iron, you cannot fuse them together anymore, but if you fuse them together, it will require more energy than the one you can actually extract from the process. But the point is, the heavier is the material, assuming of course to be lighter than the iron atom, the less energy you get out. So if you are, for example, fusing two helium atoms together, you will get less energy out from the fusion of two hydrogen atoms. So lighter material are very convenient and also simpler on a scientific standpoint and technological, of course.
Right. So this technology is something which is still a little way off actually being in existence, right? I can't point to a fusion power core today and go, that's that technology working. Is that right?
That's correct. I generally give this example to friends and colleagues that are interested in how far we are from reaching the result. And I say, think about being in Rome, but not today, maybe 1,000 years ago. And I know there's a cool place called London. And I decide I want to get there, no matter how far it is, and the fact that I have, of course, no car, no airplane, no trains. I'm just gonna walk. I know it's gonna be a very long trip, maybe exhausting one, but I know I need to get there. So I decide to walk, and I keep on walking. I get lost, of course. Sometimes I get stuck, but at the end I can reach, for example, Normandy. I think today we are in Normandy with thermonuclear fusion, and especially for inertial confinement fusion, so a specific branch. And the point is, we are very close. We know London is on the other side of the channel, but there's the channel that is separating us from the solution of the problem. And the big deal is that so far I've been a great walker. I learned to walk very well. I probably learned to jump and run, but I'm not able to swim. I can't swim. So I need to train myself to do the last bit by swimming. And remember, channel is not an easy swimming. It's quite difficult. So I need to train myself well for the last bit. So we are probably close enough, but there's the last bit that needs to be done in a very smart way, because where new physics and new aspects are coming up together, and we need to be able to control it in the best way in order to do that.
Right, so I mean, for the sake of the Justice League, I just think we have to be grateful to Batman for being able to fly over the channel.
Yeah, sure, you're right, yeah. I didn't think about that.
As we talked about at the beginning, he's also going to need a method of transport to get to and from the moon base. Now, these kind of more traditional spaceships that we're used to seeing on these giant launch pads with huge rockets burning a lot of traditional fuel, not going to be very subtle. So how would we be able to use this technology to help them out there? Would it be the same idea of being able to generate large amounts of energy and thrust from quite a small core?
Indeed, I think Batman needs something like this on his spaceship in order to travel quickly, to have something that is reliable and safe, so it's not going to explode, because rockets are full of flammable fuel, and that could be very dangerous. And Batman is a unique character, so we can't lose him. So we definitely need something that is super powerful, that can give him a lot of energy, and something that is extremely safe and reliable. So this technology can probably be squeezed with new technologies just down to probably a room, and Batman can probably build quite a big spaceship that can release a huge amount of energy that can actually transport it super quickly from the Earth to the Moon and back in probably no time.
Right. So this kind of miniaturization of these ideas and technologies, are there any other areas of physics that you're working in where these kind of ideas of making things smaller might be able to help and bring about new inventions or new ideas?
I think reduction of size is something we are experiencing in different fields of plasma physics. Another field in which this miniaturization or reduction of sizes is actually playing a key role is the so-called particle beam accelerators. So I guess we have probably all some sort of experience of knowledge of the CERN Institute that is in Geneva, Switzerland, in which to accelerate particle, so to discover new physics, they need to use this accelerator that is fairly long, is about 27 kilometers long, or if you want it, 17 miles. So it's not a short distance. Now, if you think that the new technology we're actually studying here, also at the National Institute of Physics, will allow us to produce probably the same accelerator in, let's be very optimistic, 27 centimeters, so like half a foot, we are like super miniaturizing the same technology.
Incredible. So what let's say you were successful in those kind of ideas. What would that mean for the world? So obviously I'm guessing there would be a significant cost decrease, meaning the democratization of the access to this kind of technology. But what else would that mean?
That would probably mean two sort of things, I guess. On a scientific standpoint on one side, and also on probably something that is more general, so can help people on a medical aspect. So on a scientific standpoint, it means that you don't need any more like big facilities to run some physics experiments, so they can just be run probably in small institutes or small universities, because you have super miniaturized them. And so people can rely on this sort of like small scale experiments to do what people are doing right now in the big experiments around the world. But on the other side, it means that this sort of process can also be used to produce a certain sort of radiation, for example, that can be used to treat cancer. So if you can actually achieve this sort of results, you can control them. So you need to be able to control it extremely precisely. This is quite a challenging task, but you can use it to cure people. So radiotherapy, for example, could be one option to help people from cancer.
Right, so you could essentially step into some kind of collider and have this collider collide against your foreign bodies or cancer cells within your body and target it tremendously precisely. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's very close to the real idea. Yes, you got these particles that are being accelerated, or they just go next to you, or they actually probably not collide into you, but probably they can be actually shoot to you with given energy, and so they can actually just hit the tumor within you without affecting the rest of the body.
Remarkable. And I guess with Batman doing a lot of space travel, he has the potential to be picking up lots of radiation and nasty space viruses and things, and so this could be quite a handy thing for him to have on his moon base as well. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Alberto for joining us.
That has been great. Thank you so much for having me here.
And you can follow Alberto at ALBZ_MAROCCHINO on Twitter. If you'd like to be a future guest on the podcast, please email us at info@figshare.com. And you can find us on Twitter at School of Batman.